The drums stopped. The entire courtyard went silent. Elena stood on the stone platform in her white ceremony dress, waiting for the words that would make her queen. Instead, Daemon turned away from her and reached for another woman's hand. Selene stepped forward in a deep red gown, her chin lifted with pride. Daemon placed the golden circlet on her head, right there, in front of thousands of people who had gathered to watch Elena become his Luna. The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a torch. Elena felt her knees go weak, but she did not fall. She would not give him that. From this day, Daemon announced, his voice carrying across the stone courtyard, Selene of the Ashwood Pack stands as Luna of this kingdom. Elena's ears rang. 5 years. 5 years she had stood beside Daemon, had healed his wounds after battles, had planned this very kingdom's laws with him late into the night. And now, in front of his people, in front of her people, he had erased her with a single sentence. She searched his face for some sign of regret, some flicker of the man she thought she knew. She found nothing but cold determination, the look of a king making a calculated move. Her best friend, Mira, pushed through the crowd toward her, but the guards blocked her path. Elena caught her friend's eyes for just a moment. Mira's face was pale with shock, her mouth open as if to shout something, but no sound came out. Daemon. Elena's voice cracked as she said his name. It was barely above a whisper, yet somehow it seemed to reach every corner of the silent courtyard. He did not look at her. He kept his gaze fixed on Selene, on the crown now resting on her dark hair, on the future he had apparently already decided without telling Elena a single word of it. An old advisor named Corwin, a wolf who had served 3 kings in his long life, stepped toward Elena as if to help her off the platform. She waved him away gently. She would walk on her own. She would not be carried away like something broken, even though inside, she felt exactly like that. As she stepped down from the stone platform, whispers followed her like a cold wind. Some in the crowd looked at her with pity. Others, loyal to Selene's family and their new alliance, looked away entirely, as if Elena had already become invisible. She walked through the parting crowd with her back straight and her eyes forward. Every step felt like walking across broken glass, but she refused to let anyone see her flinch. The wolves of Daemon's kingdom respected strength above all else, and if this was the last thing she gave them, she would give them that. Mira finally broke free from the guards and ran to her side. Elena, I don't understand. Just this morning he told the council you would be crowned. What happened? What changed? Ashwood Pack territory borders the northern mountains, Elena said quietly, her voice strangely calm now, as if the shock had turned into something colder and more useful. Selene's father controls the mining routes there. Silver, iron, everything Daemon needs for the war he's been planning against the Eastern Packs. You think this was purely political? I think Daemon has always been a king first, Elena said, and only sometimes a man who cared for me second. They reached the edge of the courtyard where fewer eyes could follow them. Mira gripped her arm. What will you do now? Elena did not answer right away. She looked back once at the stone platform, at Daemon standing tall beside Selene, accepting the bows of nobles who moments ago had been ready to bow to Elena instead. The golden light of the torches caught the new crown and made it gleam, a cruel kind of beauty. I don't know yet, Elena admitted, but I know I cannot stay here and watch this every single day. That night, Elena packed only what she could carry, a few dresses, a small dagger her father had given her before he died, and a locket with her mother's picture inside. She did not take anything Daemon had ever given her, not the jewelry, not the furs, not even the ring he had promised her before everything changed. Mira tried to convince her to stay, at least until morning, at least until they understood the political reasons better. But Elena had made up her mind the moment the crown touched Selene's head. She could not build a life on humiliation. She refused to become the woman who lingered in the shadows of a court that had already decided she meant nothing. As she crept through the servant corridors toward the kingdom's eastern gate, she heard voices near the throne room. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall and listened. The alliance is set, came Daemon's voice, low and controlled. Selene's father agreed to the mining rights in exchange for the marriage. We move against the Greyfell Pack within the month. And Elena? This voice belonged to Garrett, Daemon's second in command, a broad-shouldered wolf, known for his loyalty to the throne above all else. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause that told Elena everything she needed to know. Elena served her purpose, Daemon finally said. She helped stabilize this kingdom after my father's death. But a king cannot rule on gratitude alone. The Ashwood Alliance secures our borders for the next generation. Elena's chest tightened. She had been a tool, a useful arrangement, discarded the moment something more useful appeared. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound, and forced herself to keep moving, one careful step at a time, away from the voice of the man she had once loved with everything she had. The Eastern Gate guards recognized her, of course. Everyone in the kingdom knew Elena's face, but something had shifted since the ceremony. They no longer looked at her the way they used to, with respect bordering on reverence. Now their eyes held only confusion, maybe even a little pity, as if she were a ghost walking among the living. "Lady Elena," one guard said carefully, "it's late. Where are you headed at this hour?" "Away," she said simply. "That's all you need to know." The guard hesitated, glancing at his companion. Neither of them had received orders regarding Elena's movement. As far as they knew, she was still a respected member of the court, even if her title had just been stripped away in the cruelest manner possible. "Let her pass," the older guard finally said. "She's not a prisoner, not yet anyway." Those last two words echoed in Elena's mind as she stepped through the gate into the cool night air. Not yet, as if her freedom itself depended on Daemon's continued indifference toward her, rather than any right she possessed on her own. She walked until the castle lights faded behind the hills, until the only sounds around her were the wind through the trees and the distant call of night birds. She did not know exactly where she was going. She only knew she could not stay in a kingdom that had just shown the entire world how little she mattered. Hours passed. Her feet ached inside her thin traveling boots, boots meant for a lady's short walks through castle gardens, not for long journeys through wild forest paths. She stumbled more than once over roots hidden in the darkness, catching herself against rough tree trunks, scraping her palms raw. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with her. She found a small clearing beside a stream and sat down on a flat rock, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. The cold seeped into her bones, but she barely noticed it. Her mind kept replaying the moment Daemon placed the crown on Celine's head, over and over, like a wound that refused to close. She thought about screaming into the darkness, letting out every ounce of anger and grief that had built up inside her chest. But something held her back. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was simply exhaustion. Instead, she sat quietly, staring at the moonlight reflecting off the stream, and let silent tears fall down her face. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Elena's entire body went rigid. She reached for the small dagger tucked into her belt, her father's gift, and turned slowly toward the sound. Two glowing eyes stared back at her from the tree line, low to the ground, unmistakably the eyes of a wolf. She did not know if it was friend or foe. Out here, beyond the borders of Daemon's kingdom, she had no protection, no guards, no title that would keep anyone from doing as they pleased with her. The wolf stepped into the moonlight, and Elena's breath caught. It was massive, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with a coat so dark it seemed to swallow the moonlight around it. Its eyes, though, were not hostile. They studied her with an intensity that felt almost human, almost curious. "I mean you no harm," Elena said quietly, though she kept the dagger raised. "I'm only passing through." The wolf tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. Then, to her surprise, it turned and disappeared back into the trees, leaving only silence behind. Elena did not sleep much that night. She kept the dagger close, her back against the rock, watching the tree line for any sign of movement. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. She had survived the night. Whatever came next, she would face it the same way she had faced everything since the crowning ceremony, with her chin lifted and her heart guarded, refusing to let the world see just how deeply she had been broken. By mid-morning, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She had packed food, but not nearly enough for an unplanned journey with no destination. She followed the stream, hoping it would lead her toward a village, or at least fresh berries she recognized as safe to eat. Instead, it led her to the edge of a territory she recognized only from old maps and cautionary stories told around the fire. The Ironwood territory, ruled by an Alpha King, known throughout the region simply as Kael the Unbroken, a title earned after he took his throne through trial rather than birthright, defeating even his own older brother in a fair contest for leadership. Elena had never met him. Few outside his own pack had. He kept his territory closed to outsiders, a fortress of pride and isolation that made even Daemon's advisors speak of him with a mixture of respect and wariness. She hesitated at the border, marked by ancient stone markers, carved with symbols she did not recognize. Crossing meant entering territory she knew nothing about, ruled by a king whose reputation was built on strength and unpredictability. But staying meant wandering aimlessly with no food, no shelter, and eventually, no safety at all. She took a deep breath and stepped across the boundary line. Almost immediately, she sensed she was being watched. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, every rustle of leaves suddenly deliberate rather than random. She kept walking, trying to appear calm despite the racing of her heart. 3 wolves emerged from the trees ahead of her, blocking her path. They were smaller than the massive dark wolf from the night before, but still clearly trained fighters, their postures alert and disciplined. One of them shifted into human form, a young man with sharp features and cautious eyes. "You're trespassing on Ironwood territory," he said. "State your business." Elena straightened her shoulders, drawing on whatever remained of the composure she had carried through 5 years at Daemon's side. "My name is Elena. I was traveling and lost my way. I mean no harm to your territory or your king." The young man studied her for a long moment, his eyes flicking toward her fine, if now dirty and torn, traveling clothes. "You don't look like someone who simply lost her way," he said. "Those clothes belong to nobility." "I was," she said simply. "Things have changed." Something in her tone must have convinced him she was telling the truth, or at least telling enough truth to warrant further investigation rather than immediate expulsion. He exchanged a glance with his companions, then nodded slowly. "You'll need to explain yourself to the king directly," he said. "Come with us." Elena felt a flicker of fear at those words, but she pushed it down. She had already lost everything that mattered to her back in Daemon's kingdom. Whatever waited for her in Ironwood territory could hardly be worse than what she had already survived. She followed the 3 wolves deeper into the forest, toward a fate she could not yet imagine, carrying with her nothing but a small dagger, a locket with her mother's picture, and a heart that had been shattered in front of an entire kingdom just hours before. The walk took most of the afternoon. Elena's legs ached, her stomach growled with hunger she refused to complain about, and still the young guard and his companions led her deeper into unfamiliar territory. The trees here grew taller and closer together than in Daemon's lands, their branches forming a canopy so thick that sunlight only filtered through in scattered golden patches. "How much further?" she finally asked, when her legs threatened to give out beneath her. "Not far now," the young guard said. His name, she had learned along the way, was Fen. He seemed less suspicious of her than his companions, occasionally offering small pieces of information about the territory as they walked, though he remained careful never to reveal anything truly sensitive. They crested a small hill, and Elena caught her first glimpse of Ironwood Castle in the distance. It looked nothing like Daemon's kingdom, with its polished stone walls and golden banners. Ironwood Castle rose from the forest itself, built with dark timber and stone, that seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding wilderness, as if the fortress had grown from the earth rather than been constructed upon it. "It's beautiful," Elena said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty of the observation. Fen glanced at her with mild surprise. "Most outsiders find it intimidating." "Perhaps it's both," Elena replied. As they drew closer, she noticed the guards along the walls, more numerous than she expected, their eyes sharp and watchful even from a distance. This was not a kingdom that relied on alliances and political marriages for its security. This was a kingdom that trusted only its own strength. They passed through the main gate, and Elena felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, curious and calculating in equal measure. Word of an outsider's arrival had clearly traveled faster than their journey through the forest. Fen led her toward the main hall, a massive structure of dark wood and stone that seemed to absorb sound rather than echo it. The heavy doors opened before they reached them, revealing a hall lit by torches along both walls, leading toward a raised platform at the far end. And there, seated on a throne carved from a single massive tree trunk, sat the king, Elena had only heard about in whispered stories and cautionary tales. Chaol the Unbroken looked exactly as intimidating as his reputation suggested, and yet somehow more human than she had imagined. His dark hair fell just past his shoulders, and his eyes, the same eyes she had seen glowing in the darkness the night before, now studied her with open curiosity, rather than the hostility she had braced herself for. "So," Chaol said, his voice deep and measured, carrying easily through the silent hall. "This is the outsider, who wandered into my territory, in the middle of the night." Elena forced herself to meet his gaze directly, refusing to look away, despite the weight of his attention. "I did not intend to trespass, my king. I was simply looking for safety." "Safety?" Chaol repeated, leaning forward slightly on his throne. "And what exactly are you running from? That you'd risk crossing into unknown territory, rather than seek shelter in your own kingdom?" Elena hesitated. The truth felt too raw, too humiliating to speak aloud in front of this stranger and his entire court. But she had already decided, somewhere on that long walk through the forest, that she would not hide from what had happened to her. Hiding would only give Damon and Celine more power over her, even from a distance. "I was rejected," she said finally, her voice steady, despite the ache in her chest. "Publicly. By the king I served for 5 years. He chose an alliance over the bond we shared, and crowned another woman, in front of his entire kingdom." A murmur passed through the gathered court. Chaol's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, that told Elena he understood far more about betrayal than she had expected. "And what kingdom did you flee from?" he asked. Elena lifted her chin. "Damon's kingdom. I imagine you know him." The murmur through the court grew louder this time. Chaol's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Elena wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake by revealing her connection to a king who, based on the reaction around her, was clearly no friend of Ironwood territory. "I know him," Chaol said slowly. "Better than most, unfortunately." Elena held her breath, waiting to see what that history would mean for her. Chaol rose from his throne, and the entire hall seemed to shift its attention with him. He walked down the steps slowly, studying Elena the way someone might study a puzzle they had not expected to encounter. "Clear the hall," he said, and without hesitation, the gathered court began filing out through the side doors, leaving only Fen, Elena, and a woman standing near the throne, who Elena assumed was one of Chaol's advisors. "You may leave as well, Bryn," Chaol said to the woman. Bryn hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Elena with obvious curiosity, but she obeyed, following the rest of the court out of the hall. Soon, only Chaol, Fen, and Elena remained, the torches casting long shadows across the empty space. "Damon and I were never friends," Chaol said, once the doors closed. "Our fathers fought a border war 20 years ago that neither side truly won. Since then, there has been an uneasy peace between our territories, nothing more. I have no love for that man, if that is what concerns you." Relief washed through Elena, though she tried not to let it show too plainly. "I did not come here seeking to cause trouble between kingdoms," she said. "I only wanted somewhere to go where I would not have to see his face, or hers, every single day." "Hers?" "Celine," Elena said, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. "The woman he crowned in my place." Chaol's expression darkened slightly. "Ashwood Pack. Her father has been maneuvering for influence in this region for years. I'm not surprised Damon chose politics over loyalty. It seems to be a pattern with him." Elena studied Chaol's face, searching for more meaning behind his words. "You speak as if you've experienced something similar." For a moment, she thought he might refuse to answer. His jaw tightened, and his eyes seemed to look somewhere far beyond the walls of the hall, toward memories he clearly did not enjoy revisiting. "Let's just say I understand what it feels like to be discarded when someone believes they've found something more valuable," he said finally, "though my story is not one I share with strangers." Elena nodded, respecting the boundary he had drawn without pushing further. "I understand. Thank you for at least hearing me out, rather than turning me away at the border." Chaol studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if reassessing something. "You could have simply asked for shelter and food, then continued on your way tomorrow. Instead, you told me the truth about your situation, even knowing it might complicate things given my history with Damon. That took courage, or perhaps foolishness. I haven't decided which yet." Perhaps a bit of both, Elena admitted, and for the first time since the crowning ceremony, something that almost resembled a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Kale turned to Fen. Have quarters prepared for Lady Elena in the East Wing. She'll stay as a guest of Ironwood territory until she decides her next course of action. Fen bowed slightly and moved to carry out the order, but Elena raised a hand. Wait, my king, I don't wish to impose. I have no claim to your hospitality, and I understand if my presence here creates complications, given the history between your territories. You let me worry about complications, Kale said, his tone leaving no room for further argument. In Ironwood, we do not turn away those who arrive without malice in their hearts, regardless of where they come from. You will stay, at least until you've had time to rest and decide where your future lies. Elena wanted to argue further, some part of her still convinced she needed to prove she was not a burden, that she could handle whatever came next entirely on her own. But exhaustion, both physical and emotional, finally caught up with her, and she simply nodded her gratitude instead. Thank you, she said quietly. I won't forget this kindness. That night, Elena slept in a modest but comfortable room in the east wing of Ironwood Castle, the first real rest she had gotten since the ceremony that shattered her entire world. The bed was simple compared to the ornate furnishings she had grown accustomed to in Daemon's palace, but it felt safer somehow, free from memories that might ambush her the moment she closed her eyes. She woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through a narrow window, and for a brief, peaceful moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then the memories crashed back over her like a wave, and she lay still for several minutes, forcing herself to breathe through the fresh wave of grief and humiliation. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She rose and found Bryn, the advisor from the throne room, standing outside with a tray of food and fresh clothing. The king thought you might need these, Bryn said, her tone carefully neutral, though her eyes studied Elena with obvious curiosity. Fresh clothes, and breakfast. If you need anything else, simply ask one of the servants. Thank you, Elena said, accepting the tray. May I ask you something? Bryn hesitated, then nodded. What happened to King Kale, before he took the throne? He mentioned understanding what it feels like to be discarded, but he wouldn't elaborate. Bryn's expression shifted, something guarded settling over her features. That's not my story to tell, she said carefully. If the king wishes to share it with you, he will do so himself, in his own time. I'd advise patience. Elena nodded, understanding the boundaries of the conversation, though her curiosity remained unsatisfied. Of course, I apologize for asking. You needn't apologize, Bryn said, her tone softening slightly. Curiosity is natural. Just know that whatever happened, it changed him significantly. The king who sits on that throne today is not the same man he was 5 years ago. 5 years. The same length of time Elena had spent at Daemon's side. The coincidence sent a strange chill down her spine, though she could not quite place why it felt significant. After breakfast, Elena changed into the fresh clothing Bryn had provided. Simple but well made, far more practical than the elaborate gowns she had worn as a member of Daemon's court. She found herself grateful for the change, as if shedding her old clothing meant shedding some small piece of the identity that had been torn from her. She spent the following days exploring the parts of Ironwood Castle that were open to guests, careful never to wander into restricted areas. She learned the layout of the gardens, met several members of the household staff who treated her with cautious kindness, and slowly began to understand the rhythm of a kingdom entirely different from the one she had left behind. Daemon's kingdom had thrived on grandeur and political maneuvering, every conversation carrying hidden meaning, every alliance calculated for maximum advantage. Ironwood territory felt different, rougher around the edges perhaps, but somehow more honest. The wolves here spoke plainly, valued strength and loyalty over political cunning, and seemed genuinely puzzled by the kind of scheming that had defined Elena's previous life. She encountered Kale only occasionally during those first days, always from a distance, always surrounded by advisors or handling matters of territory business. He never approached her directly, and she wondered if perhaps their conversation in the throne room had been a singular kindness, not meant to develop into anything further. On the 5th day, everything changed. Elena was walking through the eastern gardens when she heard raised voices coming from near the training grounds. Curious despite herself, she followed the sound, and found a group of warriors gathered around a sparring circle, watching two fighters exchange blows with practiced intensity. One of the fighters was Kale himself, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost effortless, despite the power behind each strike. His opponent, a broad-shouldered warrior nearly as large as Kale, fought with equal skill, though it quickly became clear that Kale held the advantage. Elena found herself drawn closer, watching with genuine admiration as Kale disarmed his opponent with a swift, precise movement that ended the match decisively. The gathered warriors cheered, and Kale offered his opponent a hand up, the two exchanging words that seemed to carry mutual respect, despite the competitive nature of their match. As the crowd began to disperse, Kale's eyes found Elena standing at the edge of the training grounds. He said something to his opponent, then walked toward her, wiping sweat from his brow with a cloth one of the attendants offered him. "Enjoying the spectacle?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You fight well," Elena said honestly. "I've seen many warriors train in Daemon's kingdom, but few move with the kind of precision you just displayed." "High praise from someone who spent 5 years surrounded by trained soldiers," Kale replied, "though I suspect you're simply being polite." "I don't do polite very well," Elena said, surprising herself with the boldness of the statement. "If I found your fighting mediocre, I would have simply said nothing at all." Kale studied her for a moment, and something in his expression shifted, a genuine smile finally breaking through his usual composed demeanor. "I appreciate honesty. It's rarer than you might think, especially among those who spend time in royal courts." "How are you settling in?" he asked, gesturing for her to walk alongside him as he headed back toward the castle. "Better than I expected," Elena admitted. "Your people have been kind, considering I arrived here as an unknown outsider, connected to a kingdom you clearly have no fondness for. My people judge based on actions, not history," Kale said. "You've shown nothing but respect and gratitude since your arrival. That matters more here than which kingdom you originally came from." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, passing through the gardens toward the main castle. Elena found herself acutely aware of Kale's presence beside her, the quiet confidence he carried in every movement, so different from the calculated charm Daemon had always displayed in public settings. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said finally, breaking the silence. "You can ask. I make no promises about answering." "Fair enough," she said, allowing herself a small smile. "What happened to you before you took the throne?" "Bryn mentioned you understood what it felt like to be discarded, but she wouldn't tell me more." Kale's expression grew distant for a moment, and Elena worried she had pushed too far, too quickly. But then he sighed, a long breath that seemed to carry years of buried tension. "I was betrothed once," he said quietly. "Before I became king, her name was Isolde. We were meant to be mates, chosen by our families to strengthen the alliance between Ironwood and a neighboring territory." Elena listened carefully, sensing the weight behind every word. "3 days before our bonding ceremony, she left with my own brother," Kale continued, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious pain beneath the surface. "They fled together, seeking refuge in a distant territory where our family's influence couldn't reach them. I later learned they had been secretly involved for over a year, even while she remained publicly betrothed to me." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly, understanding now why he had reacted the way he did upon learning her connection to Daemon. "Don't be," Kale said. "It taught me valuable lessons about trust and about the difference between genuine loyalty and convenient arrangements. When my father passed and the throne came into question, I challenged my brother for leadership rather than allowing the succession to pass to someone who had already proven he valued personal desire over duty and honor." "You defeated your own brother for the throne," Elena said, recalling the stories she had heard about Kale's rise to power. "I did what needed to be done to ensure Ironwood territory would be led by someone who understood the weight of responsibility," Kale said simply. "My brother chose to leave with Isolde afterward. I have not seen either of them since, and I have no desire to." Elena absorbed this information, understanding now why Kale had reacted with such quiet intensity upon learning about her situation with Daemon. They shared something painful in common, both betrayed by those they trusted, both forced to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of very public humiliation. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said. "I know it wasn't an easy story to tell." "You told me your truth without hesitation, back in the throne room, even knowing it might complicate your welcome here," Kale said. It seemed only fair to offer the same honesty in return. They reached the castle entrance, and Kale paused before heading inside, turning to face Elena directly. I meant what I said before. You're welcome to stay here, as long as you need, Elena. Ironwood territory could use someone with your intelligence and resilience, whether you choose to remain permanently, or simply, until you've decided your next path forward. I appreciate that more than you know, Elena said, and she meant every word. As Kale walked away, Elena remained in the garden for a while longer, processing everything she had learned. The similarities between their stories struck her deeply, two people betrayed by those closest to them, both forced to find strength in the aftermath of devastating public humiliation. She thought about Damon, about the crowning ceremony, about the crown resting on Celine's head instead of her own. The pain remained, sharp and raw, but standing here in Ironwood territory, surrounded by people who valued her honesty rather than her usefulness, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel, so soon after everything that happened. She felt the smallest flicker of hope. Word of a rider approaching Ironwood's borders reached the castle before the rider himself did. Elena was in the library, a quiet room lined with shelves of old texts about pack law and territory history, when Bryn burst through the door, her face tight with concern. A messenger has arrived from Damon's kingdom, Bryn said. He's asking to speak with the king immediately. Elena's stomach dropped. She set down the book she had been reading and rose quickly. Do you know what he wants? Not yet. But given the timing, I think we can both guess. Elena followed Bryn through the castle corridors toward the main hall, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and something else she couldn't quite name. Had Damon discovered where she had gone? Had he sent someone to bring her back, or worse, to cause trouble for the kingdom that had taken her in? When they arrived at the hall, Kale was already seated on his throne, his expression unreadable as a messenger in Damon's colors stood before him, flanked by two Ironwood guards. Speak your message, Kale said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone Elena had heard during her first meeting with him. The messenger, a young man who looked nervous despite his obvious attempt at composure, cleared his throat. King Damon sends word that Lady Elena, formerly of his court, has gone missing following recent events. He requests information regarding her whereabouts, and asks that if she has taken refuge in Ironwood territory, she be returned to his kingdom for her own safety. A tense silence followed the messenger's words. Elena felt every eye in the hall turn toward her, though she remained near the back, partially hidden by Bryn's presence beside her. Kale's expression remained carefully neutral, though Elena could sense the tension building beneath his calm exterior. And why would King Damon be so concerned about the safety of a woman he publicly humiliated in front of his entire kingdom? The messenger's eyes widened slightly, clearly not expecting Kale to be so directly informed about the circumstances surrounding Elena's departure. I could not say, my king. I was simply instructed to deliver the message and await a response. Kale's gaze shifted, scanning the hall until it landed on Elena. Lady Elena, would you care to step forward? Elena hesitated for only a moment before walking toward the front of the hall, her chin lifted despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She stopped beside Kale's throne, facing the messenger directly. Tell King Damon that I am safe, and that I have no intention of returning to his kingdom, she said, her voice steady and clear. My departure was my own choice, made freely after the events of the crowning ceremony. I require no rescue, and certainly not from the man who orchestrated my humiliation in the first place. The messenger shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such a direct and firm response. My lady, King Damon simply wishes to ensure your well-being, given the sudden nature of your departure, and the dangers of traveling unescorted through unfamiliar territories. My well-being was of little concern to him when he placed a crown on another woman's head in front of thousands of witnesses, Elena replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from creeping into her tone. You may tell him that Ironwood territory has shown me more genuine care in a matter of days than his kingdom offered in 5 years of loyal service. The messenger glanced nervously at Kale, as if seeking guidance on how to proceed, but Kale simply gestured toward the door. You have your answer. You may return to your king, and deliver it exactly as she spoke it. The messenger bowed stiffly and departed, clearly relieved to be free of the tension that had filled the hall during the exchange. Once the doors closed behind him, Kale turned to Elena, studying her with an expression that mixed concern and something that looked almost like admiration. You handled that well, he said. I meant every word, Elena replied. Daemon has no right to concern himself with my safety now, not after what he did. I agree entirely, Chaol said, but I suspect this won't be the last we hear from his kingdom. A message like that, delivered so publicly through official channels, suggests he's more concerned about appearances than genuine worry for your safety. Elena considered this, the political weight behind Chaol's words sinking in slowly. You think he's worried about how it looks? That the woman he rejected fled to a rival territory rather than remaining quietly in his kingdom or disappearing entirely? Exactly, Chaol said. If word spreads that Elena, his former intended Luna, found refuge and respect in Ironwood territory after being publicly humiliated, it raises uncomfortable questions among his own people about the wisdom of his choice to crown Selene instead, questions he would rather avoid entirely. The realization settled over Elena like a slow-building storm. Her presence in Ironwood territory was no longer simply a personal matter of finding safety and rebuilding her life. It had become a political complication for Daemon, one that threatened the very narrative he had tried to construct around his alliance with Selene's family. What happens now? She asked. Now, we wait, Chaol said, and we prepare for the possibility that Daemon may attempt further contact, or worse, more direct action, if he believes his political standing is threatened by your continued presence here. That evening, Elena found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing through the implications of the day's events. She rose from her bed and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, wandering down to the castle's eastern terrace, where she often found solitude among the quiet gardens below. To her surprise, Chaol was already there, leaning against the stone railing, staring out at the moonlit forest beyond the castle walls. Couldn't sleep either? He asked without turning around, somehow having sensed her approach. Too much to think about, Elena admitted, joining him at the railing. I keep wondering if my presence here is putting your kingdom at risk. Perhaps I should consider moving on, somewhere further from Daemon's reach, somewhere that wouldn't create complications for you and your people. Chaol turned to face her, his expression serious. Is that truly what you want? To keep running, further and further away, simply to avoid becoming an inconvenience for someone else? Elena hesitated. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Chaol said firmly. You're a woman who was wronged, seeking safety and a chance to rebuild her life. If Daemon wishes to create political trouble over that simple fact, then the fault lies entirely with him, not with you. But if it puts Ironwood at risk, Ironwood has weathered far greater risks than an uncomfortable political message from a neighboring kingdom, Chaol interrupted gently. I did not offer you refuge lightly, Elena. I understood the potential complications when I made that offer, and I stand by it fully. Elena studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any sign of hesitation or regret, but found none. Why? She asked softly. Why go through the trouble of protecting someone you barely know, especially when it risks tension with a neighboring kingdom? Chaol was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting back toward the forest. Because I understand what it feels like to be discarded by someone who should have protected you, he said finally. And because in the short time you've been here, you've shown more strength and honesty than most people I've known for years. That's not something I take lightly. The sincerity in his voice sent a warmth through Elena's chest that she hadn't expected, a feeling entirely separate from the grief and anger that had defined her emotions since the crowning ceremony. She found herself studying Chaol's profile in the moonlight, noticing details she hadn't fully registered before, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet intensity in his eyes even in stillness. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. I don't think I properly expressed how much your kindness has meant to me since I arrived here. You don't need to thank me, Chaol said, turning back to face her fully. Just promise me you'll stop considering leaving, simply to avoid being an inconvenience. Ironwood is stronger than any political message Daemon might send, and frankly, I would prefer you stayed. The last words hung in the air between them, carrying weight that went beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. Elena felt her heart quicken slightly, though she pushed the feeling aside, uncertain what to make of it, given everything she had experienced so recently. I'll stay, she said finally, at least for now. Over the following weeks, Elena settled more fully into life within Ironwood territory. She began assisting Brynn with administrative matters, drawing on the political experience she had gained during her years in Daemon's court. though she was careful to apply that knowledge in service of Ironwood's interests, rather than any lingering loyalty to her former kingdom. She and Chaol developed a comfortable rhythm, often discussing territory matters over evening meals, occasionally walking together through the gardens as they had that first day after his sparring match. Elena found herself looking forward to these interactions, more than she cared to admit, drawn to Chaol's steady presence, and the genuine respect he showed her opinions, so different from the calculated charm Daemon had always displayed. But the political tension surrounding her presence had not disappeared entirely. Reports began filtering in from various sources suggesting Daemon's alliance with Celene's family was proving more complicated than expected. Some of Ashwood Pack's warriors resented taking orders from a king who had not been born into their bloodline, while members of Daemon's original court quietly questioned the wisdom of an alliance that had cost them Elena's steady counsel and diplomatic skill. The rumors suggest growing unrest within Daemon's court, Brynn reported one afternoon, laying out several messages gathered from Ironwood's network of informants across the region. Apparently, Selene has been making decisions without consulting Daemon's original advisors, causing significant friction among the nobility who supported his rule for years. Elena read through the reports carefully, feeling a complicated mixture of emotions. Part of her felt a small satisfaction at hearing that Daemon's chosen path was proving difficult, a validation of sorts for the years of steady guidance she had provided that now seemed to be missing from his court. But another part of her simply felt tired, wishing she could fully separate herself from the political games of her former kingdom, rather than continuing to track its unraveling from a distance. "Does this create opportunities for Ironwood?" she asked, forcing herself to think practically rather than emotionally. "Perhaps," Brynn said, "though the king has been cautious about appearing to exploit Daemon's political troubles too directly. He doesn't want to give the appearance that Ironwood harbored you specifically to weaken a rival kingdom." "That's wise," Elena said. "Though I imagine some in Daemon's court might assume exactly that, regardless of the truth." Later that evening, Elena found Chaol in his private study, reviewing similar reports about the growing unrest within Daemon's kingdom. He looked up as she entered, gesturing for her to take the seat across from his desk. "You've seen the reports," he said, not quite a question. "I have," Elena confirmed, settling into the chair. "It seems Celene's leadership style is causing more friction than Daemon anticipated. Does it satisfy you, seeing his kingdom struggle?" Chaol asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Not entirely," she admitted. "I spent 5 years trying to strengthen that kingdom, working alongside advisors and nobles I genuinely respected. Seeing it struggle now feels less like satisfaction and more like watching something I helped build slowly fall apart. I don't wish harm on the people there, even if I have no love left for Daemon himself." Chaol studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his expression. "That's a more generous perspective than most would hold, given everything you experienced." "Perhaps," Elena said, "or perhaps I simply understand that the ordinary people within that kingdom bear no responsibility for Daemon's choices. They deserve stability, regardless of my personal feelings toward their king." "You would have made an excellent Luna," Chaol said quietly, the words slipping out before he seemed to fully consider them. Elena felt her breath catch slightly at the unexpected comment. "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness," Chaol said, meeting her eyes directly. "It's simply the truth. Daemon lost something valuable when he chose politics over loyalty. I've had the privilege of witnessing that firsthand these past weeks." The air between them felt charged with something neither of them had directly acknowledged, a growing connection that had been building slowly since that first conversation on the terrace. Elena found herself unsure how to respond, uncertain whether the warmth spreading through her chest was simply gratitude for his kindness or something deeper that she hadn't allowed herself to consider. Before either of them could address the moment further, a sharp knock interrupted them. Fen entered quickly, his expression tense. "My king, we have a situation at the northern border. A group of armed riders wearing Daemon's colors has been spotted approaching Ironwood territory." Chaol rose immediately, his relaxed demeanor vanishing, replaced by the sharp focus of a leader, preparing for potential conflict. "How many riders?" "A dozen, perhaps more," Fen reported. "They're moving at a controlled pace, not the speed of an immediate attack, but their numbers suggest more than a simple diplomatic visit." "Assemble the guard," Chaol ordered. But hold them back from the border until we understand their intentions. I want no unnecessary provocation." Fen nodded and hurried out to carry out the orders. Elena rose from her chair, her heart pounding, with a mixture of fear and anger. "This is because of me, isn't it? Damon sent armed riders because his messenger's diplomatic approach failed to bring me back." "We don't know that for certain," Cale said, though his expression suggested he shared her suspicion. "But given the timing, it seems likely." "I need to speak with them," Elena said. "If this is about me, I should be the one to address it directly, rather than risking conflict between our kingdoms over something that started with Damon's own choices." "Absolutely not," Cale said firmly. "If Damon has sent armed riders, I won't have you walking directly into potential danger to satisfy his political games. But if my presence is the source of this tension, hiding behind your walls will only make things worse," Elena argued. Cale's jaw tightened, clearly torn between respecting Elena's determination and his own instinct to protect her from potential harm. "We'll go together," he said finally. "I won't send you out there alone, but I understand your point about facing this directly, rather than allowing the situation to escalate through avoidance." They made their way to the northern border, accompanied by a contingent of Ironwood's most trusted guards. The riders had stopped just beyond the boundary markers, clearly aware they were entering territory where an armed approach could be seen as a hostile act. As they drew closer, Elena recognized the lead rider immediately. Garrett, Damon's second in command, sat atop his horse with an expression that mixed determination and discomfort in equal measure. "Garrett," Elena said, stepping forward before Cale could speak. "What brings you to Ironwood territory, with armed riders at your back?" Garrett's eyes widened slightly upon seeing her, though he quickly composed himself. "Lady Elena, King Damon sent us to ensure your safe return to his kingdom." "I already sent my answer through your previous messenger," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the tension coiling in her chest. "I have no intention of returning. Why has Damon escalated this to an armed approach, rather than accepting my clearly stated wishes?" Garrett shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, glancing briefly at Cale, before returning his attention to Elena. "The political situation has grown complicated," he said carefully. "Certain members of the court are questioning the wisdom of the Ashwood alliance, particularly given your absence and the manner in which it occurred. King Damon believes your return would help stabilize the situation. So this isn't about my safety at all," Elena said, anger creeping into her voice despite her efforts to remain composed. "This is about managing political fallout from his own decisions. He wants me to return simply to smooth over the consequences of publicly humiliating me." "My lady, I understand your anger," Garrett said, his tone genuinely apologetic despite his loyalty to Damon. "I've served alongside you for years and witnessed your dedication to strengthening our kingdom. I don't agree with how things unfolded at the ceremony, but I have my orders." "Your orders don't change my answer," Elena said firmly. "Tell Damon that I will not return simply to serve as a political tool once again, smoothing over problems he created through his own choices. I found refuge here in Ironwood territory, among people who value my presence for who I am, not simply for my usefulness in managing his political image." Cale stepped forward beside her, his presence radiating quiet authority. "Lady Elena's decision is final," he said, addressing Garrett directly. "She is under Ironwood's protection now, by her own choice, and with my full support. I would advise King Damon to respect that decision, rather than escalating this situation further, with armed riders approaching my territory's borders." Garrett studied Cale for a long moment, clearly weighing the political implications of the standoff before him. "I'll relay your message, King Cale, though I suspect this won't be the last attempt to resolve the situation." "Then Damon should prepare himself for continued disappointment," Cale replied evenly. "Because Ironwood territory does not surrender those under our protection, simply because a neighboring king finds their absence politically inconvenient." Garrett nodded stiffly, then turned his horse, signaling for his riders to withdraw. Elena watched them go, feeling a complicated mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The immediate confrontation had passed without violence, but she understood this was unlikely to be the end of Damon's attempts to reclaim control over the narrative surrounding her departure. As they walked back toward the castle, Cale remained quiet for a while, clearly processing the implications of what had just occurred. "This confirms my suspicions," he said finally. "Damon isn't concerned about your safety. He's concerned about maintaining his political standing, and your continued presence here undermines the story he's trying to tell his own people about the strength of his alliance with Ashwood Pack. I never wanted to become a political weapon against him, Elena said quietly. I simply wanted to escape a situation that had become unbearable. I know, Cale said, his tone gentling, but sometimes circumstances take on a life of their own, regardless of our original intentions. Your presence here, and your clear refusal to simply disappear quietly, has become something larger than either of us anticipated. They walked in silence for a while longer, the weight of the day's events settling heavily over both of them. Finally, Elena spoke again, voicing a thought that had been building since the confrontation at the border. I don't want to bring conflict to your kingdom, Cale. If my presence here continues to create tension with Daemon's territory, perhaps I should reconsider my situation. Cale stopped walking, turning to face her directly. I told you before, Elena, I don't take offers of protection lightly, and I don't rescind them simply because they become politically complicated. You are not responsible for Daemon's choices, nor for his inability to accept the consequences of his own actions. But, no buts, Cale said firmly, though his tone remained gentle. I want you to stay, Elena, not simply because turning you away would validate Daemon's poor treatment of you, but because your presence here has genuinely benefited this kingdom, and honestly, it has benefited me personally as well. The sincerity in his words left Elena momentarily speechless. She studied his face, searching for any hint of exaggeration or false comfort, but found only genuine conviction in his expression. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know how I'll ever properly repay the kindness you and your people have shown me. You don't need to repay anything, Cale said. Just continue being exactly who you are. That's more than enough. Over the following days, Elena found herself thinking constantly about the confrontation at the border, replaying Garrett's words in her mind. The political situation within Daemon's kingdom was clearly deteriorating faster than she had anticipated, the consequences of his choice to prioritize the Ashwood alliance over loyalty and genuine partnership becoming increasingly apparent to his own court. She also found herself thinking constantly about Cale, about the way he had stood beside her during the confrontation, refusing to yield to Daemon's demands despite the political risk involved. Something had shifted between them since that night on the terrace, a growing warmth that neither of them had directly acknowledged but that colored every interaction between them. One evening, as autumn began settling over Ironwood territory and the leaves started turning shades of gold and crimson, Elena joined Cale for a walk through the forest paths surrounding the castle, a routine that had become comfortable and familiar over the preceding weeks. Can I ask you something? Elena said, as they walked along a path lined with ancient oak trees. Of course, Cale replied. Do you regret offering me refuge here? Given everything that's happened since, the tension with Daemon's kingdom, the political complications. Cale stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Not for a single moment, he said. If anything, these past weeks have reminded me why I chose to lead Ironwood with honesty and directness, rather than the kind of political maneuvering that defines kingdoms like Daemon's. Your presence here has been a genuine gift, Elena, regardless of the complications it has brought. Elena felt her heart quicken at his words, the warmth in his voice unmistakable. I feel the same way about being here, she admitted. Ironwood has given me something I didn't expect to find so soon after everything that happened. A sense of belonging and genuine respect, rather than simply usefulness. You deserve far more than simply being useful, Cale said quietly, taking a step closer to her. You deserve to be valued for exactly who you are, Elena. Your intelligence, your resilience, your honesty. Daemon failed to see that, but I see it clearly. The space between them had narrowed considerably, the tension of unspoken feelings finally reaching a point where neither of them could ignore it any longer. Elena found herself studying Cale's face in the fading evening light, noticing the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch slightly. Cale, she said softly, unsure exactly what she meant to say next. I know this is complicated, Cale said, his voice low. Given everything you've experienced, given the wounds that are surely still healing, I don't want to push you towards something you're not ready for. But I need you to know that my feelings toward you have grown into something far beyond simple hospitality or political alliance. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and hope swirling together in a way she hadn't experienced since long before the crowning ceremony that had shattered her previous life. I feel it too, she admitted. Though I'll admit, part of me is frightened by how quickly these feelings have developed, especially given everything I've been through. We don't need to rush anything, Kale said gently. I simply wanted you to know how I feel, so that whatever happens between us moving forward happens with complete honesty, rather than unspoken assumptions. Elena nodded, appreciating his careful consideration of her emotional state, even as the warmth between them continued to build. Thank you for your patience and your honesty, she said. I think, given time, I would genuinely like to explore what's developing between us. But you're right, that I need to heal properly first, rather than rushing into something new, simply to escape the pain of what happened before. Take all the time you need, Kale said. I'm not going anywhere, Elena, and Ironwood will remain your home for as long as you wish it to be. They resumed their walk, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, though the warmth between them remained palpable, a promise of something deeper waiting patiently to unfold. As they returned to the castle in the gathering darkness, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a very long time, a quiet confidence that despite everything Damon had taken from her, she had found something in Ironwood territory that held the promise of genuine happiness. But that peace would prove short-lived, as news arrived the following morning that would once again threaten to upend everything Elena had begun rebuilding. Bryn arrived at Elena's chambers just after dawn, her expression grave. Elena, you need to come to the main hall immediately. There's news from Damon's kingdom, and it concerns you directly. Elena dressed quickly, and followed Bryn through the corridors, her mind racing with possibilities. Had Damon sent more riders? Had he escalated his demands further? Nothing could have prepared her for what awaited in the main hall. Kale stood near the throne, a letter in his hand, his expression unreadable as he studied the parchment. When he looked up and saw Elena approaching, something in his eyes softened slightly, though the tension in his shoulders remained. What's happened? Elena asked. Kale handed her the letter. This arrived an hour ago, carried by one of our informants within Damon's court. I think you should read it yourself. Elena took the parchment with trembling hands and began reading. The letter was written in Celine's hand, addressed not to Elena directly, but to a contact within Ironwood territory, clearly intended to reach Elena through indirect channels. The letter revealed something Elena had never expected. Celine had not simply been a political pawn in her father's schemes, but had actively orchestrated much of the alliance herself, manipulating Damon through carefully cultivated influence over several months before the crowning ceremony ever took place. More disturbing still, the letter suggested that Celine had convinced Damon that Elena had been secretly working against him, feeding false information to rival kingdoms, a claim entirely fabricated to justify the sudden shift in Damon's affections. This is a lie, Elena said, her voice shaking with anger. I never worked against Damon's interests. I dedicated 5 years of my life to strengthening his kingdom. I believe you, Kale said firmly. But this letter suggests Celine manufactured false evidence to convince Damon of your supposed betrayal, giving him justification to set aside your bond without appearing simply mercenary or cruel in the eyes of his court. Why would she send this letter to your informant? What does she gain by revealing her own manipulation? Kale's expression grew troubled. That's the concerning part. Read further. Elena continued reading, and her stomach twisted as she reached the letter's true purpose. Celine was not confessing out of guilt or seeking to right a wrong. She was attempting to establish contact with Ironwood territory for her own political purposes, hinting at growing dissatisfaction with her position within Damon's kingdom, and suggesting she might be interested in an alliance with Kale that would benefit both parties, should circumstances between her and Damon deteriorate further. She's trying to secure a fallback position, Elena realized. If her alliance with Damon collapses due to the internal unrest we've heard about, she wants to ensure she has other options available. Precisely, Kale said. And by revealing the truth about how she manipulated Damon into rejecting you, she's likely hoping to gain your trust, or at least neutralize you as a potential obstacle, while positioning herself as a valuable asset, should she need Ironwood's support in the future. Elena felt a cold fury building within her chest, different from the raw grief she had experienced at the crowning ceremony. This was calculated betrayal, on top of calculated betrayal, Celine using the very truth of her manipulation as another tool to further her own ambitions. What do we do with this information? Elena asked. That depends on what you want to do with it, Kale said carefully. This letter proves you were wronged based on fabricated claims, not genuine failings on your part. If this information were to reach Damon's court, particularly his most trusted advisors, it could significantly damage Celine's standing and potentially expose the manipulation that led to your rejection. Elena considered this for a long moment. Part of her wanted nothing more than to see Celine exposed, to watch the woman who had stolen her rightful place suffer the same public humiliation Elena had endured. But another part of her, the part that had spent years genuinely caring about the well-being of Damon's kingdom and its people, hesitated at the thought of deliberately destabilizing a territory that was already struggling with internal unrest. I need time to think about this, Elena said finally. This isn't a decision I want to make purely out of anger or desire for revenge. Take whatever time you need, Kale said. This information isn't going anywhere, and I won't push you toward any particular course of action. This is your choice, Elena. Elena spent the following days wrestling with the implications of Celine's letter. She spoke with Bryn about the political ramifications, considered various scenarios for how the information might be used, and found herself increasingly drawn toward a path that felt true to who she wanted to be, rather than simply seeking revenge against those who had wronged her. One afternoon, she sought out Kale in his study, having finally reached a decision she felt confident in. I've decided what I want to do, she said, taking a seat across from his desk. I'm listening, Kale said, setting aside the documents he had been reviewing. I don't want to use this information to destroy Celine, or to further destabilize Damon's kingdom, Elena said. Not because I've forgiven either of them, but because innocent people within that kingdom would suffer from the political chaos that would follow. The advisors I worked alongside for years, the common people who depend on stability rather than court intrigue, I won't sacrifice their well-being for my own satisfaction. Kale studied her thoughtfully. That's a remarkably generous perspective, given everything you've endured. It's not entirely selfless, Elena admitted. I also don't want to become someone who uses manipulation and political maneuvering as a primary tool, even against those who deserve it. That's not the kind of person I want to be, especially not here, in a kingdom that has shown me such genuine kindness. So what do you propose instead? I want to send a private message to Damon's most trusted advisor, Corwin, Elena said. Not a public exposure of Celine's manipulation, but simply enough information to encourage the kingdom's leadership to look more carefully at the decisions being made, and to reconsider whether Celine's continued influence truly serves the kingdom's best interests. Let them investigate and act as they see fit, without me directly orchestrating any particular outcome. Kale nodded slowly, clearly impressed by the measured approach Elena had settled on. That seems like a wise path forward. It allows the truth to surface naturally, through appropriate channels, without you bearing responsibility for whatever consequences might follow. Will you help me arrange this message to Corwin? Elena asked. Of course, Kale said, though I want you to understand something first. What's that? Regardless of how this plays out with Damon's kingdom, my feelings toward you, and my commitment to your safety and well-being here in Ironwood, remain unchanged, Kale said, his tone gentle but firm. You don't need to prove anything to me through how you handle this situation. I already see the strength and integrity in how you've chosen to move forward. Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words, gratitude mixing with the growing affection she had been carefully nurturing since their conversation in the forest weeks earlier. Thank you, she said softly. That means more to me than you probably realize. They spent the following hours carefully crafting a message to send to Corwin, one that would provide enough information to prompt investigation, without directly implicating Ironwood territory in any deliberate scheme against Damon's kingdom. Once the message was sent through one of Ironwood's trusted informants, Elena felt a strange sense of closure, as if she had finally taken control of her own narrative, rather than simply reacting to circumstances imposed upon her by others. Weeks passed with no immediate response from Damon's kingdom, though occasional reports continued to filter through Ironwood's network of informants. The internal unrest within Damon's court appeared to be growing, with several key advisors reportedly beginning to question Celine's influence more openly, though nothing had yet reached the point of open confrontation. During this period, Elena's relationship with Kale continued to deepen naturally, built on the foundation of trust and honesty they had established since her arrival. They spent increasing amounts of time together, sharing meals, discussing territory matters, occasionally simply enjoying quiet moments in the gardens, or along the forest paths surrounding the castle. One evening, as the first signs of winter began settling over Ironwood territory, Chaol invited Elena to join him for dinner in his private quarters, a gesture that carried significance beyond a simple meal, given the formal customs typically observed within pack hierarchies regarding such invitations. "This feels different," Elena observed as she settled into the chair across from him, noting the intimate setting of the private dining arrangement, compared to their usual meals in the more public dining hall. "It is different," Chaol admitted. "I wanted a chance to speak with you privately, away from the usual business of territory matters and political concerns." "About what?" Chaol set down his utensils and met her eyes directly. "About us, Elena. About where things stand between us, and where you might see this relationship heading, now that some time has passed since we first acknowledged our feelings for each other." Elena felt her heart quicken, though the anxiety that had once accompanied such conversations had faded considerably over the weeks she had spent healing within Ironwood territory. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted, "and I think I'm ready to explore what's developing between us more fully, without the hesitation that held me back before." "Are you certain?" Chaol asked, his tone careful despite the obvious hope in his expression. "I don't want you to feel pressured, given everything you experienced with Damon." "I'm certain," Elena said, and she meant it completely. "What I feel for you is entirely different from anything I experienced with Damon. He valued me for my usefulness, for what I could contribute to his political ambitions. You valued me simply for who I am, from the very first moment we met, even before you knew anything about my capabilities or potential usefulness to your kingdom. That's because your worth was never in question," Chaol said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand gently. "I saw it clearly from the beginning, Elena. Your strength, your intelligence, your genuine care for others even in the midst of your own pain. Damon was a fool to discard something so valuable simply for political convenience." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes, though they were tears of gratitude rather than the grief that had once defined her emotional state. "Thank you for seeing me clearly," she said, "for giving me the space to heal, and for being patient while I found my way back to trusting my own judgment about matters of the heart." "I would wait as long as necessary," Chaol said, "but I'm grateful I don't have to wait much longer." That evening marked a turning point in their relationship, the careful boundaries they had maintained, finally giving way to an honest acknowledgement of the deep connection that had grown between them. As winter settled fully over Ironwood territory, Elena found herself building a new life, one founded on genuine partnership and mutual respect, rather than the calculated arrangements that had defined her years with Damon. But even as her personal happiness grew, the political situation surrounding Damon's kingdom continued to simmer beneath the surface, and Elena knew, with a certainty born from years of political experience, that the true resolution of this conflict had not yet arrived. The message arrived on a cold morning in early winter, carried by one of Ironwood's most trusted informants who had traveled through the night to deliver it. Bryn brought it directly to Elena, her expression carefully neutral despite the obvious significance of the moment. "This is from Corwin," Bryn said, handing over a sealed letter, marked with the old advisor's personal insignia. "He's requested that you read it before deciding whether to share its contents with King Chaol." Elena broke the seal carefully, her hands steady, despite the anticipation building in her chest. The letter was written in Corwin's careful, formal handwriting, every word chosen with obvious deliberation. "Lady Elena," the letter began, "I write to you with grave news regarding the situation within our kingdom. Following the information that reached me through indirect channels, I initiated a careful investigation into the circumstances surrounding your departure. What I discovered has confirmed my worst suspicions, and I believe you deserve to know the full truth." Elena continued reading, her heart pounding as Corwin detailed the extent of Celine's manipulation. It had begun months before the crowning ceremony, with Celine's father orchestrating a careful campaign to convince Damon that an alliance with Ashwood Pack was essential for the kingdom's security against growing threats from the eastern territories, threats that Corwin's investigation suggested had been significantly exaggerated to create false urgency. More damning still, Corwin had uncovered evidence that Celine had personally fabricated documents suggesting Elena had been in secret correspondence with rival kingdoms, sharing sensitive information about Damon's military preparations. These forged documents had been the final piece of manipulation that convinced Damon to set aside his bond with Elena, believing he was protecting his kingdom from a genuine threat rather than falling victim to calculated deception. I have presented this evidence to King Daemon directly, Corwin's letter continued. His reaction has been one of genuine shock and considerable anger, both toward Selene for her deception, and toward himself for failing to properly investigate such serious claims before acting upon them. The kingdom currently stands at a crossroads, with growing calls among the nobility for Selene's removal from her position as Luna, given the fraudulent circumstances under which she attained it. Elena set down the letter, her mind racing through the implications of what she had just read. Vindication, in its purest form, the truth finally exposed after months of humiliation and uncertainty. But alongside the vindication came a complicated tangle of other emotions, uncertainty about what this revelation might mean for her own future, and a lingering concern about the stability of a kingdom she had once dedicated years of her life to strengthening. She found Chaol in the training grounds, overseeing a routine exercise with several of Ironwood's warriors. He noticed her approach immediately, his expression shifting to concern as he took in her troubled demeanor. "What's happened?" he asked, dismissing the training exercise and walking toward her. Elena handed him the letter without a word, watching his expression as he read through Corwin's careful account of the investigation and its findings. His jaw tightened with anger as he reached the details of Selene's fabricated evidence, and something like cautious hope flickered across his features as he finished reading. "This changes everything," he said finally, looking up from the letter. "Does it?" Elena asked. "The truth has been exposed, but I'm not certain what that truth actually changes for me, personally. I've already begun building a new life here, a life that has nothing to do with returning to Daemon's kingdom, or reclaiming a position I no longer want." "I understand," Chaol said carefully, "but Corwin's letter suggests significant political upheaval is likely within Daemon's court. There may be pressure for you to return, not necessarily to reclaim your previous position, but simply to help stabilize the kingdom during this transition." Elena considered this possibility, feeling a familiar weight of obligation settling over her shoulders, the same sense of duty that had kept her loyal to Daemon's kingdom for 5 years, despite the personal sacrifices involved. "I don't know if I'm ready to return to that world, even temporarily," she admitted. "I've found something here, Chaol, something genuine and lasting. I don't want to risk losing that by getting pulled back into political games I thought I had escaped." "Then don't," Chaol said simply. "You don't owe Daemon's kingdom anything, Elena. Whatever debt of loyalty you felt toward the people there, you've more than repaid it through years of dedicated service. The choice of how to respond to this situation is entirely yours, without obligation to anyone else's expectations." "Thank you," Elena said softly. "I needed to hear that." Over the following days, more information continued to filter through Ironwood's network regarding the situation in Daemon's kingdom. The nobility had indeed rallied against Selene, demanding her removal from the position of Luna given the fraudulent circumstances of her ascension. Daemon, apparently racked with guilt over his hasty and poorly investigated decision to reject Elena, had begun making overtures suggesting he wished to make amends, though the exact nature of these amends remained unclear based on the fragmented reports reaching Ironwood. Then, nearly 3 weeks after Corwin's initial letter, a formal delegation arrived at Ironwood's borders, requesting an audience with both King Chaol and Lady Elena. Unlike the previous armed riders, this delegation consisted of unarmed representatives, led by Corwin himself, a clear signal of diplomatic rather than confrontational intent. Elena stood beside Chaol in the main hall as Corwin and his companions were escorted inside, the old advisor's weathered face showing both relief and lingering guilt as he approached them. "Lady Elena," Corwin said, bowing respectfully, "thank you for granting us this audience. I know the circumstances surrounding your departure make this a difficult situation for all involved. I appreciate your honesty in uncovering the truth, Corwin," Elena said. "Though I confess, I'm uncertain what purpose this delegation serves, given that I have no intention of returning to serve as Daemon's Luna." Corwin nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her directness. "I understand your position completely, and I want to assure you that King Daemon does not expect, nor does he feel entitled to, your return under any circumstances. The purpose of this delegation is different." "Then please, explain," Chaol said, his tone carefully neutral despite the obvious tension in the hall. "King Daemon wishes to formally acknowledge the grave injustice done to Lady Elena, both to her personally and to the kingdom's own standards of proper conduct and investigation, before such significant decisions are made, Corwin explained. He has removed Celine from her position as Luna, and her father's alliance has been formally dissolved. Celine and her remaining loyal supporters have been exiled from the kingdom's borders. Elena absorbed this information carefully, feeling a complicated mixture of vindication and weariness. And what does Daemon hope to gain by sending this delegation to inform me of these changes? Corwin hesitated slightly before continuing. He hopes, at minimum, for your forgiveness, even if reconciliation of any deeper kind is no longer possible or desired. He also wishes to offer a formal public apology, acknowledging the injustice done to you, delivered before his entire court, mirroring the very public nature of the original humiliation you experienced. The hall fell silent as Elena processed this offer. A public apology, an opportunity for the same crowd that had witnessed her humiliation to now witness her vindication. Part of her felt a fierce satisfaction at the thought, a sense of justice finally being served after months of pain and uncertainty. But another part of her, the part that had found genuine peace and happiness within Ironwood territory, wondered whether returning to that kingdom, even briefly, would simply reopen wounds that had only recently begun to heal. I need time to consider this offer, Elena said finally. This isn't a decision I can make immediately, given everything that's transpired. Of course, Corwin said. King Daemon understands if you require time, or even if you ultimately decline the offer entirely. He simply wished for you to know the full truth of what has occurred, and to extend this gesture, regardless of your final decision. After the delegation departed, having secured lodging within Ironwood territory while awaiting Elena's response, she found herself once again seeking out Chaol's counsel, though this time, the decision felt heavier, more consequential than any she had faced since her arrival. What do you think I should do? She asked him later that evening, as they sat together in his private study. I think this decision belongs entirely to you, Chaol said carefully. I won't pretend I have no feelings about the possibility of you returning to Daemon's kingdom, even temporarily. But I trust your judgment, Elena, and whatever you decide, I will support you fully. That's not entirely helpful, Elena said, a small smile tugging at her lips, despite the seriousness of the conversation. Chaol returned her smile, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Perhaps not, but I think the real question you need to ask yourself isn't what serves Daemon's kingdom, or even what satisfies any lingering desire for vindication. The real question is, what serves your own healing, and your own sense of closure regarding everything that happened? Elena considered his words carefully, recognizing the wisdom in shifting her focus away from external obligations and toward her own genuine needs. I think, she said slowly, working through her thoughts as she spoke, that I do want to face that crowd again, not to reclaim anything I lost, but to show them, and myself, that I've built something better than what Daemon offered me. I want them to see that his rejection didn't break me, that I found strength and happiness despite what he did. That sounds like a decision made from strength, rather than from need for validation, Chaol said approvingly. If that's truly what you want, I'll stand beside you throughout it, whatever form that public reckoning takes. Would you come with me? Elena asked, surprised by how much she wanted his presence beside her, during what promised to be an emotionally complex return to her former kingdom. I wouldn't let you face that alone, Chaol said firmly, not for a single moment. Elena felt a surge of gratitude and love for the man beside her, recognizing how far she had come since that terrible night when Daemon's crowning ceremony had shattered her entire world. She was no longer the woman who had fled through the forest in desperation and fear. She had become someone stronger, someone who could face her past with confidence rather than dread, supported by a partner who valued her completely rather than conditionally. The following morning, Elena informed Corwin of her decision. She would return to Daemon's kingdom, not to reclaim her former position, but to witness his public acknowledgement of the injustice done to her, and to demonstrate, before the entire court, that she had found something far more valuable than what she had lost. The journey back to Daemon's kingdom felt entirely different from the desperate flight Elena had undertaken months earlier. This time, she traveled with dignity, accompanied by Chaol and a modest escort of Ironwood's finest warriors, rather than fleeing alone through unfamiliar forest paths in the dead of night. As their party approached the familiar castle walls, Elena felt a strange mixture of emotions rising within her chest. Memories of her years spent within these walls flooded back, both the genuine friendships she had built with members of the court and the devastating pain of her public rejection. But alongside these memories, she felt a steady confidence that had not existed within her during those final desperate hours before her flight. Corwin met them at the main gate, his expression showing genuine relief at Elena's arrival. "Lady Elena, King Chaol, welcome. King Daemon has arranged for the formal ceremony to take place this afternoon, in the same courtyard where the original incident occurred." Elena nodded, appreciating the symbolic significance of that choice, though she wondered whether Daemon had suggested it out of genuine understanding, or simply as a calculated gesture meant to demonstrate his remorse as visibly as possible. They were shown to guest quarters within the castle, a courtesy that felt strange given Elena's history within these very walls. As she prepared for the ceremony ahead, changing into a formal gown Brynn had helped her select before their departure from Ironwood, Elena found herself studying her reflection in the mirror, noting the changes in herself since she had last stood within this castle. She looked stronger somehow, more settled in her own identity, despite the emotional weight of the day ahead. Chaol entered the room as she finished dressing, his expression softening as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "And more importantly, you look like someone who has found genuine strength, rather than someone bracing for further pain." "That's exactly how I feel," Elena said, turning to face him fully. "Thank you for being here with me, Chaol. I don't think I could face this moment with the same confidence if you weren't standing beside me." "You would have found the strength regardless," Chaol said, "but I'm honored to share this moment with you nonetheless." As the appointed hour approached, Elena and Chaol made their way toward the same courtyard where her humiliation had unfolded months earlier. The space was filled with members of the court, nobles and advisors, along with common citizens who had gathered to witness what had become a significant political event within the kingdom. Elena spotted several familiar faces among the crowd, including Mira, who caught her eye immediately and offered a warm, encouraging smile. The sight of her old friend brought a wave of emotion, gratitude for the loyalty Mira had shown even during Elena's darkest moment. Daemon stood on the same stone platform where he had once crowned Selene, though his posture now carried none of the confident authority he had displayed during that previous ceremony. Instead, he appeared subdued, his expression carrying visible guilt as Elena and Chaol approached. The crowd fell silent as Elena and Chaol reached the base of the platform. Daemon stepped forward, his eyes meeting Elena's directly, for the first time since that devastating night months earlier. "Lady Elena," Daemon began, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard, though it lacked the commanding confidence she remembered from their years together. "I stand before you, and before this entire court, to acknowledge a grave injustice that I committed against you, based on fabricated evidence that I failed to properly investigate before acting upon it." Elena remained silent, allowing him to continue, her expression carefully composed despite the swirl of emotions building within her chest. "I was deceived by Selene and her father's calculated manipulation," Daemon continued. "But that deception does not excuse my own failure to seek proper counsel and verification before making a decision that publicly humiliated someone who had served this kingdom with unwavering loyalty and dedication for 5 years. I acted rashly, prioritizing what I believed to be political necessity over the trust and partnership we had built together." He paused, his eyes searching Elena's face for some reaction, though she offered him nothing beyond quiet, dignified attention. "I cannot undo the pain I caused you that night," Daemon continued, "nor can I fully restore what was lost between us. But I can, before this entire court, formally acknowledge that you were wronged, that the accusations against you were entirely fabricated, and that your character and loyalty throughout your years within this kingdom were beyond reproach." The crowd murmured at this public acknowledgement, and Elena felt a complicated wave of emotions crash through her, vindication mixed with lingering grief for what she had lost, and gratitude for the strength she had found in its place. "Furthermore," Daemon said, his voice growing steadier, "I wish to acknowledge, publicly, that Lady Elena has found refuge and evident happiness within Ironwood territory, under the protection and partnership of King Chaol. I recognize that whatever bond we once shared has been replaced by something that clearly serves her far better than what I offered." Elena finally stepped forward, addressing Daemon directly for the first time since her arrival. "Thank you for this acknowledgement, Daemon. The truth matters, both for my own sake and for the integrity of this kingdom's leadership moving forward." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing, aware that her next words would be heard not just by Damon, but by the entire assembled court, many of whom had witnessed her original humiliation. I spent 5 years believing that my worth was tied to my usefulness within this kingdom's political ambitions, Elena continued, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. That night, when you crowned Celine in my place, I believed I had lost everything that mattered. But I've since learned that true partnership isn't built on calculated political advantage. It's built on genuine respect, honesty, and mutual care, regardless of external circumstances. She glanced toward Cale, who stood watching her with obvious pride and love in his expression, before turning back to address Damon and the assembled crowd. I found that genuine partnership within Ironwood territory, she continued, not because I sought revenge against you, or because I wished to prove something to this court, but because I discovered my own worth, independent of any political usefulness. I forgive you, Damon, for the pain you caused me, though I will not forget the lesson I learned about the difference between being valued and being used. A profound silence settled over the courtyard, as Elena's words hung in the air, carrying weight far beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. Damon nodded slowly, his expression a complex mixture of relief and lingering regret. "Thank you for your grace, Lady Elena," he said finally. "This kingdom, and I personally, are fortunate to have benefited from your service, even if I failed to recognize its true value until it was too late." As the formal ceremony concluded, the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, clearly wishing to witness the aftermath of such a significant public reconciliation. Mira pushed through the remaining crowd to embrace Elena warmly. "I'm so proud of you," Mira said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You handled that with more grace and strength than I could have imagined possible. Thank you for standing by me, even when it would have been easier to simply move on with the court's new arrangements," Elena said, returning her friend's embrace. "You're my friend, Elena." "Nothing that happened here changed that, regardless of titles or political circumstances," Mira said firmly. As they spoke, Corwin approached, along with several other advisors who had clearly been waiting for an opportunity to speak with Elena privately, away from the formal ceremony. "Lady Elena," Corwin said, "I wanted to personally thank you for the measured way you handled the information regarding Celine's manipulation. Many advisors within this court have expressed genuine admiration for your restraint and wisdom, rather than seeking more dramatic forms of retribution that could have caused significant harm to this kingdom's stability." "I never wanted to cause harm to the people of this kingdom," Elena said. "Regardless of Damon's personal failings, the citizens here deserve stability and genuine leadership, not further political chaos. Your perspective reflects exactly the kind of wisdom this kingdom benefited from during your years of service," Corwin said. "It's a genuine loss that circumstances led to your departure, though I understand and respect your decision to build a new life within Ironwood territory." As the conversations continued, Cale remained close to Elena's side, offering quiet support without overshadowing the moment that clearly belonged to her. Eventually, as evening began settling over the kingdom, Elena and Cale prepared to depart, having accomplished what they had traveled to achieve. Before leaving, Elena sought out Damon one final time, finding him standing alone near the edge of the courtyard, staring out at the fading light with an expression of quiet contemplation. "Damon," she said, approaching him directly. He turned to face her, his expression uncertain. "Elena, I wasn't sure if you would seek me out before your departure." "I wanted to say one final thing," Elena said. "Despite everything that happened, I don't regret the years I spent serving this kingdom alongside you. I learned valuable lessons, both about myself and about the difference between genuine partnership and convenient arrangements. I hope you've learned similar lessons from everything that transpired." "I have," Damon said quietly. "More than I care to admit, honestly. I hope you find lasting happiness within Ironwood territory, Elena. You deserve far better than what I offered you." "Thank you," Elena said simply, before turning to rejoin Cale, ready to leave her past behind and return to the future she had begun building for herself within Ironwood territory. As their party departed the kingdom that had once defined her entire existence, Elena felt a profound sense of closure settling over her, the weight of months of grief and uncertainty finally lifting from her shoulders. She had faced her past directly, witnessed genuine accountability from the man who had wronged her, and demonstrated to an entire court that her worth had never depended on anyone else's recognition or validation. But as they traveled back toward Ironwood territory, Elena sensed that this chapter's closure marked not an ending, but rather a beginning, the true start of a new life, built on genuine love and mutual respect, waiting to unfold before her. The return journey to Ironwood felt lighter than any travel Elena had experienced since the crowning ceremony that had upended her life. She rode beside Cale, occasionally catching his eye and sharing a quiet smile, the weight of unresolved history, with Daemon's kingdom finally settled and released. As they crossed back into Ironwood territory, Elena felt something shift within her, a sense of truly arriving home, rather than simply seeking temporary refuge. The forest paths, that had once seemed unfamiliar and intimidating during her desperate flight, now felt welcoming, familiar landmarks marking the route toward the castle that had become her sanctuary. Upon their arrival, they were greeted warmly by Bryn and Fen, along with several other members of Ironwood's court who had grown fond of Elena during her months living among them. Word of the successful reconciliation ceremony had already reached the castle through their network of informants, and the mood throughout Ironwood territory carried a palpable sense of celebration. "How did it feel?" Bryn asked Elena later that evening, as they shared a quiet meal together, standing before that court again, after everything that happened. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Strange, at first. Old memories and old pain resurfaced more sharply than I expected. But by the time Daemon finished his acknowledgement, I realized something important. That pain no longer defined me. I had built something entirely new and separate from that old life, something that gave me the strength to face my past without being consumed by it." "That takes remarkable courage," Bryn said. "Many people would have simply avoided confronting that pain altogether, choosing to move forward without ever looking back." "Perhaps," Elena said, "but I think facing it directly gave me a sense of closure I wouldn't have found otherwise. I needed to see, with my own eyes, that Daemon's kingdom continued without me, that the world hadn't ended simply because my role within it had changed so dramatically." As the days passed following their return, life within Ironwood territory settled into a comfortable rhythm. Elena continued assisting with administrative matters, her experience proving increasingly valuable as Ironwood's political relationships with neighboring territories grew more complex, following the public reconciliation with Daemon's kingdom. Her relationship with Cale continued deepening as well, the foundation of trust and mutual respect they had built over the preceding months, providing fertile ground for a love that felt entirely different from anything Elena had experienced with Daemon. Where her bond with Daemon had always carried an underlying current of political calculation, her connection with Cale felt genuine and uncomplicated, built purely on authentic affection and shared values. One crisp winter morning, several weeks after their return from Daemon's kingdom, Cale requested Elena's presence in his private study, his tone carrying a seriousness that immediately caught her attention. "Is everything all right?" she asked, settling into her usual chair across from his desk. "Everything is more than all right," Cale said, though his expression carried an unusual nervousness that Elena had rarely witnessed in him before. "I've been thinking a great deal about our future together, Elena, about what I want this partnership between us to become." Elena felt her heart quicken, sensing the significance building within their conversation. "What exactly are you thinking?" Cale rose from his desk and walked around to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. "Elena, these past months have shown me something I never expected to find again after the betrayal I experienced with Isolde. You've shown me that genuine partnership is possible, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than calculated advantage or convenient arrangement." "You've shown me the same thing," Elena said softly, her eyes searching his face. "I want to build a future with you," Cale continued, his voice steady, despite the obvious emotion behind his words. "Not simply as advisor and king, or even simply as partners sharing affection for one another, but as true mates, bonded together before my entire kingdom, in the way that Daemon should have honored you from the very beginning." Elena's breath caught in her throat as the full weight of his words settled over her. "Cale, are you asking?" "I'm asking you to become my Luna," Cale said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not because it serves any political purpose, not because of any calculated advantage for my kingdom, but because I love you, completely and genuinely, and I want the entire world to know that you are valued, respected, and cherished in the way you deserve." Tears filled Elena's eyes as she processed the magnitude of what Cale was offering her. This was nothing like the calculated arrangement she had shared with Damon, built on political necessity and convenient alliance. This was genuine love, offered freely and without hidden agenda. "Yes," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I want to become your Luna, Kale. I want to build a life with you, based on everything we've discovered together these past months." Kale's face broke into a genuine smile of pure joy, and he pulled her into an embrace that carried all the warmth and security she had been missing throughout her years within Damon's calculated court. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart, after everything you've endured." "Thank you for showing me what genuine partnership actually looks like," Elena replied, her voice muffled against his chest. They spent the following hours discussing plans for their bonding ceremony, though both agreed they wanted the process to unfold naturally, without excessive haste, allowing proper time for preparation, and for Elena to fully settle into her new role within Ironwood's leadership structure. News of their engagement spread quickly throughout Ironwood territory, met with genuine celebration from the castle's staff and warriors alike, many of whom had grown to respect and admire Elena during her months living among them. Bryn, in particular, seemed overjoyed by the announcement, immediately beginning preparations for what promised to be a significant ceremony within the kingdom's history. "I couldn't be happier for both of you," Bryn said, embracing Elena warmly upon hearing the news. "You've brought something genuinely valuable to this kingdom, Elena, beyond even your obvious political skills. You've reminded all of us what true partnership looks like." As preparations for the bonding ceremony began in earnest, word inevitably reached Damon's kingdom regarding the upcoming celebration. Elena received a formal letter from Corwin, offering sincere congratulations on behalf of the kingdom's leadership, along with a personal note from Mira, expressing her joy and requesting permission to attend the ceremony as Elena's guest. Elena readily agreed to Mira's request, grateful for the opportunity to have her oldest friend present during what promised to be one of the most significant moments of her new life. She also received, somewhat to her surprise, a formal message from Damon himself, offering his sincere well wishes and acknowledging, once again, the genuine happiness he could see Elena had found within Ironwood territory. As winter began giving way to the first signs of approaching spring, preparations for the bonding ceremony intensified throughout Ironwood territory. Elena found herself immersed in details she had never anticipated needing to consider, from the specific rituals unique to Ironwood's pact traditions, to the diplomatic considerations of which neighboring territories should receive formal invitations to witness the historic union. Throughout this period, her bond with Kale continued deepening, each day revealing new facets of genuine compatibility and shared values that reinforced her confidence in the decision they had made together. Unlike her years with Damon, where every interaction carried subtle undertones of political calculation, her relationship with Kale felt refreshingly straightforward, built on honest communication and mutual support through every challenge they encountered together. One evening, as they walked together through the gardens that had witnessed so many pivotal moments in their developing relationship, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked Kale. "If Damon had never crowned Celine that night, if I had simply continued my life within his kingdom, never discovering what genuine partnership actually feels like." Kale considered the question thoughtfully before responding. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, "though honestly, I struggle to imagine a version of events that doesn't lead to this moment, to us standing here together, building a future based on genuine love, rather than convenient arrangement." "Do you believe everything happens for a specific reason?" Elena asked. "I believe that difficult circumstances often reveal our true character and our genuine values," Kale said. "Damon's betrayal was undoubtedly painful, but it also revealed your remarkable strength and resilience, qualities that might have remained hidden had you continued living comfortably within his calculated court." Elena nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. "I suppose you're right. As painful as that night was, it led me here, to genuine happiness I couldn't have imagined possible during those darkest hours. And it led me to you," Kale added, pulling her closer as they continued their walk through the moonlit gardens. "For that alone, I find myself strangely grateful for circumstances that once caused you such profound pain." As spring finally arrived in full bloom throughout Ironwood territory, the date for their bonding ceremony drew steadily closer. promising a celebration that would formally mark the beginning of Elena's new role as Luna, of a kingdom that had shown her the true meaning of genuine partnership and unconditional respect. 3 days before the scheduled ceremony, an unexpected visitor arrived at Ironwood's borders, requesting urgent audience with King Cale. Fen brought the news to Elena and Cale as they reviewed final preparations for the upcoming celebration, his expression carrying obvious concern. "My king, the visitor claims to carry information of significant importance regarding the ceremony's security. She says her name is Isolde." The name struck the room like a physical blow. Elena watched as Cale's expression shifted from confusion to controlled tension, memories of his own painful betrayal clearly resurfacing at the mention of his former betrothed. "What could Isolde possibly want, after all these years?" Cale said, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. "Should we grant her audience?" Fen asked. Cale glanced at Elena, silently seeking her input on how to proceed. "I think we should hear what she has to say," Elena said carefully. "If she's traveled this far to deliver information regarding our security, dismissing her without listening could prove unwise, regardless of your history with her." Cale nodded slowly, though his jaw remained tight with barely controlled tension. "Bring her to the main hall, but maintain a careful watch throughout the audience." When Isolde was finally escorted into the hall, Elena studied her with careful curiosity. She was strikingly beautiful, with pale hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that immediately swept the room, taking in every detail before settling on Cale with an expression that mixed guilt and urgency in equal measure. "Cale," Isolde said, her voice carrying genuine distress, "I know I have no right to seek audience with you, given everything that happened between us, but I've traveled far to warn you of a genuine threat." "Speak your warning then," Cale said, his tone carefully controlled, despite the obvious tension radiating from him. "My brother, your own former brother, has been plotting against your throne for years," Isolde said, her words tumbling out with obvious urgency. "After we fled together, our relationship soured within a matter of months. He became obsessed with reclaiming what he believed was rightfully his, the throne of Ironwood territory. I only recently discovered the full extent of his planning, and I felt compelled to warn you, despite everything that happened between us." Elena watched Cale's expression carefully, noting the complex mixture of emotions playing across his features as he processed this unexpected revelation. "What exactly has he been planning?" Cale asked. "He's gathered a small force of mercenaries and disgruntled former Ironwood warriors who left following your ascension to the throne," Isolde explained. "He intends to strike during your bonding ceremony, believing the celebratory atmosphere and gathered crowds will provide the perfect cover for an assassination attempt, followed by an immediate claim to the throne, based on his original bloodline right." The hall fell silent as the gravity of this information settled over everyone present. Elena felt a cold fear grip her chest, not for herself, but for Cale, and for the celebration that was meant to mark the beginning of their new life together, now potentially threatened by violence and betrayal from within his own family. "Why would you risk revealing this information to me, after everything that happened between us?" Cale asked, his voice carrying genuine confusion alongside the tension. Isolde's expression softened slightly, guilt evident in her eyes. "Because despite everything, despite the terrible way I hurt you by leaving with your brother, I never intended for genuine harm to come to you. When I discovered his plans for violence, I couldn't simply remain silent, regardless of the awkwardness or danger involved in warning you directly." Cale studied her for a long moment, before finally nodding. "Thank you for this warning, Isolde. Regardless of our history, I'm grateful you chose to prevent genuine tragedy rather than remaining silent." "What will you do now?" Isolde asked. "We'll need to strengthen security throughout the ceremony," Cale said, already shifting into strategic thinking mode. "But we cannot simply cancel the celebration, or reveal that we're aware of this plot, or my brother may simply delay his attack to a moment when we're less prepared." Elena stepped forward, her mind already working through the tactical implications of this threat. "We should allow the ceremony to proceed as planned, but with significantly increased security, disguised within the celebration itself. If your brother believes his plan remains undiscovered, we can use that assumption to our advantage, positioning warriors strategically throughout the crowd, without alerting him to our awareness of his intentions." Cale looked at her with evident admiration. "That's a wise strategy. We'll need Fen to coordinate discreet security placements throughout the courtyard and surrounding areas. Over the following 3 days, Ironwood territory prepared for both the celebration and the potential threat lurking beneath its festive surface. Fen worked tirelessly with Kael's most trusted warriors, developing a comprehensive security plan that would protect the ceremony while maintaining the appearance of a purely celebratory gathering. Isolde remained within Ironwood territory throughout this period, providing additional details about her brother's plans as she recalled them, her cooperation proving invaluable, despite the awkward history that colored every interaction between her and Kael. "I know this doesn't erase what I did to you," Isolde said to Kael during one of their final conversations before the ceremony, "but I hope this warning demonstrates that whatever affection I once felt for you was genuine, even if my subsequent choices caused you tremendous pain." "I appreciate your honesty and your courage in coming forward," Kael said, "though I think it's best if we maintain appropriate distance moving forward, given everything that transpired between us." "I understand completely," Isolde said. "I only wish to prevent tragedy, not to reinsert myself into your life in any lasting way." As the day of the ceremony finally arrived, Elena felt a complex mixture of emotions, joy and anticipation, for the celebration marking her formal bond with Kael, mixed with underlying tension regarding the security threat that loomed beneath the festive preparations. She dressed carefully that morning, assisted by Bryn and several other members of the household staff, who had become close friends during her months within Ironwood territory. The ceremonial gown she wore carried none of the calculated political symbolism that had defined her wardrobe during her years with Daemon. Instead, it reflected genuine Ironwood tradition, crafted with care by artisans who had grown to respect and admire their future Luna. "Are you nervous?" Bryn asked, helping Elena secure the final details of her ceremonial attire. "About the bonding itself, not at all," Elena admitted. "But I confess, knowing about the threat hanging over today's celebration makes it difficult to fully relax into the joy this moment deserves." "Kael and Fen have prepared thoroughly," Bryn reassured her. "The security measures in place should prevent any genuine harm from reaching either of you or the gathered crowd." As the appointed hour approached, Elena made her way toward the courtyard where the ceremony would take place, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and lingering tension regarding the potential threat that awaited them. She caught sight of Kael standing near the ceremonial platform, dressed in formal attire that emphasized his commanding presence as Ironwood's king, and felt her nervousness settle into quiet determination. Whatever threats lurked within the gathered crowd, she and Kael would face them together, just as they had faced every challenge since her arrival within Ironwood territory months earlier. The courtyard had been transformed for the occasion, decorated with early spring flowers and banners bearing Ironwood's ancient symbols. Hundreds of guests had gathered, including representatives from several neighboring territories, along with Mira and a small delegation from Daemon's kingdom, who had traveled to witness the historic bonding ceremony. Elena scanned the crowd carefully as she took her position near the ceremonial platform, aware that somewhere within this gathered assembly, Kael's brother and his mercenary force might be waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She caught glimpses of Ironwood's warriors positioned discreetly throughout the courtyard, disguised among the celebratory crowd, ready to respond at the first sign of trouble. Kael stepped forward to address the gathered assembly, his voice carrying the same commanding authority Elena had witnessed during her very first day within Ironwood territory, though now it carried genuine warmth alongside that authority. "Today marks a significant moment in Ironwood's history," Kael began, his eyes finding Elena's across the platform. "Not simply the bonding of myself to a partner I've grown to love completely, but the beginning of a new era for our kingdom, one built on the same values of honesty, strength, and genuine partnership that Elena has demonstrated since the very day she arrived within our borders." The crowd murmured appreciatively, many nodding in agreement as they recalled Elena's journey from a wounded refugee to a respected and valued member of their community. As Kael continued his address, Elena noticed subtle movement near the edge of the courtyard, a group of unfamiliar faces positioning themselves closer to the platform than seemed natural for simple wedding guests. Her heart began racing, recognizing the telltale signs of the threat Isolde had warned them about. She caught Fen's eye across the courtyard, offering a subtle signal they had agreed upon beforehand. Fen nodded almost imperceptibly, quietly alerting the disguised warriors positioned throughout the crowd to the growing danger. Kale's brother, whom Elena recognized from descriptions Isolde had provided, stepped forward from the suspicious group, his hand moving toward a concealed weapon beneath his ceremonial cloak. But before he could complete the motion, Ironwood's warriors moved with practiced precision, surrounding the group before they could execute their planned attack. "Stand down," Kale commanded, his voice carrying across the now tense courtyard. "Your plot has been discovered, brother. This ends now, before more harm can come to anyone gathered here today." Kale's brother, whose name Elena had learned was Aldrich, froze as he realized his carefully planned assassination attempt had been anticipated and countered before it could even begin. His mercenary companions, recognizing the futility of resistance against Ironwood's prepared warriors, quickly surrendered rather than risk further confrontation. "How did you know?" Aldrich demanded, his expression a mixture of shock and simmering anger, as guards secured him and his companions. "Isolde warned us," Kale said simply. "She could not stand by and allow you to commit violence against innocent people, simply to reclaim a throne that was never truly yours, by right, given your own choices years ago." Aldrich's expression shifted to genuine fury at the mention of Isolde's betrayal, though the guards quickly escorted him and his remaining companions away from the ceremony, ensuring the celebration could continue without further disruption. As the immediate threat was neutralized, a wave of relief swept through the gathered crowd, quickly followed by renewed enthusiasm for the ceremony that had been so dramatically interrupted. Kale turned back toward Elena, his expression carrying both relief and renewed determination to proceed with the celebration that meant so much to both of them. "Shall we continue?" he asked softly, reaching for her hand. "Absolutely," Elena said, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "Nothing, not even a foiled assassination attempt, will prevent us from celebrating what we've built together." The ceremony resumed with even greater emotional weight than originally anticipated, the gathered crowd now doubly appreciative of the genuine partnership being celebrated before them, having witnessed firsthand the strength and unity Elena and Kale demonstrated, even in the face of genuine danger. As the formal bonding rituals unfolded, ancient words and traditions unique to Ironwood territory, binding Elena and Kale together before their entire community, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of peace and fulfillment settle over her. This moment, threatened though it had been by lingering betrayal from Kale's past, represented everything she had hoped to find since fleeing Daemon's kingdom months earlier. When Kale finally placed the ceremonial crown upon her head, marking her formal ascension to Luna of Ironwood territory, the crowd erupted in genuine celebration, their cheers carrying a warmth and authenticity that stood in stark contrast to the cold, calculated atmosphere that had surrounded her original crowning ceremony within Daemon's kingdom. Elena caught sight of Mira among the celebrating crowd, tears of joy streaming down her friend's face as she witnessed this moment of genuine triumph and happiness. Even the small delegation from Daemon's kingdom seemed genuinely moved by the celebration, their presence a testament to how far Elena's journey had come since that devastating night when her entire world had seemingly collapsed. "I am so proud to call you my Luna," Kale whispered to her as the crowd continued their celebration, his eyes shining with genuine love and admiration. "You've shown this entire kingdom what true strength and resilience looks like, Elena, not simply through surviving betrayal, but through building something genuinely beautiful in its aftermath." "We built this together," Elena replied softly, meeting his eyes with complete confidence and joy. "Your patience, your genuine respect, and your unwavering support gave me the space to heal and to discover my own worth, independent of anyone else's calculated usefulness for me." As the celebration continued late into the evening, filled with genuine warmth and joy from the assembled community, Elena found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From the devastating humiliation of Daemon's crowning ceremony, through the desperate flight across unfamiliar forest paths, to the gradual healing and genuine love she had discovered within Ironwood territory, every step of that difficult journey had ultimately led her toward a happiness she couldn't have imagined possible during those darkest hours. Later that night, as the formal celebrations finally wound down and guests began retiring to their prepared accommodations, Elena and Kale found a quiet moment alone on the same terrace where they had first acknowledged their growing feelings for each other months earlier. Do you remember, Elena said, leaning against the stone railing beside him, that first night on this terrace, when you told me you understood what it felt like to be discarded? I remember, Cale said softly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I never imagined that conversation would lead us here, to this moment of genuine partnership and happiness. Neither did I, Elena admitted. That night, I felt completely broken, uncertain whether I would ever trust anyone again, or find genuine value beyond my usefulness to someone else's ambitions. And now? Cale asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. Now, I know exactly what genuine partnership feels like, Elena said, turning to face him fully. I know what it means to be valued completely, not for calculated political advantage, but simply for who I am. Damon's betrayal, as painful as it was, led me towards something infinitely more valuable than what I lost that night. Cale pulled her closer, his eyes reflecting the same love and devotion that had grown steadily between them since that first difficult conversation. I love you, Elena. Not simply as my Luna, or as a valuable partner in leading this kingdom, but as the woman who showed me that genuine trust and partnership remain possible, even after devastating betrayal. I love you too, Elena replied, her heart full with a happiness she had once believed lost forever, completely, and without reservation. As they stood together on that quiet terrace, the stars beginning to emerge across the clear spring sky above Ironwood territory, Elena felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of Damon's betrayal remained a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she had emerged from that darkness stronger, wiser, and ultimately, genuinely happy, crowned not simply as another king's convenient political arrangement, but as a partner truly cherished and valued for exactly who she was. The kingdom of Ironwood had given her far more than simple refuge. It had given her a genuine home, a community that valued her for her authentic self, and a partner who understood, deeply and completely, that true strength lies not in never being broken, but in finding the courage to build something beautiful from the pieces left behind. And as the celebration finally faded into peaceful night, Elena knew, with complete certainty, that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them from a place of genuine strength and love, standing firmly beside the partner, who had shown her that being truly seen and valued was worth every difficult step of the journey that had led her there.